The Monday morning sun filtered weakly through the dusty blinds of the Alvarez family's modest two-bedroom apartment. Maya Alvarez stood at the kitchen counter, pouring cereal into a bowl for her 7-year-old son, Ethan. His school uniform hung loosely on his small frame, his smile sleepy but sweet. "Eat up, champ, or we'll be late again," she said, trying to keep her tone cheerful. But behind her calm voice was the ever-present anxiety of juggling 2 jobs, overdue bills, and the uncertainty that had settled into their lives over the past few years. Daniel, her husband, was still asleep in the bedroom. His construction business had been slow for months, though he always had money for drinks with his friends or new clothes. Maya didn't have the energy for another argument that morning. She focused on Ethan instead, tucking a stray curl behind his ear. "Big day at school today?" she asked. "We're starting science projects," Ethan said, spooning cereal without much enthusiasm. "I'm doing mine on rockets." "Rockets," she smiled. "That's my little astronaut." He grinned, but there was a faint pallor to his skin she couldn't ignore. He'd been getting tired more easily lately. Some nights, she would find him asleep on the couch before dinner, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She had chalked it up to growth spurts or too much playtime at recess, but something in her gut had been whispering that it was more. That whisper turned into a scream 2 hours later. Maya was midway through her shift at the small bookstore, where she worked mornings, when her phone rang. The screen showed the name of Ethan's school. "Mrs. Alvarez, it's the school nurse," the voice said, tight and urgent. "Ethan collapsed during recess. We've called an ambulance. He's on the way to St. Catherine's Hospital." Her knees buckled. "What? How is he?" "He's conscious but weak. Please meet us there as soon as you can." She didn't remember hanging up. She just grabbed her bag, muttered something to her manager, and ran into the street to flag down the first taxi she saw. Her heart pounded the entire way, the city blurring past the window. In the emergency room, Ethan lay on a hospital bed, small and pale, with wire snaking from his chest to a monitor that beeped steadily. A nurse was adjusting the 4-drip. "Mom," he said weakly when he saw her, trying to smile. She brushed his hair back, forcing a smile of her own. "I'm here, baby. You scared me." The ER doctor arrived moments later, a tall, middle-aged man with kind eyes behind his glasses. "Mrs. Alvarez, I'm Dr. Mensah. We've run some initial tests. Ethan has a congenital heart defect, specifically a ventricular septal defect. It's a hole in the wall separating the lower chambers of his heart." Maya blinked, the words slamming into her. "A hole? How? Why didn't we know?" "Some children are asymptomatic until later," he said gently. "But his recent fatigue and today's collapse mean his heart is struggling. He'll need surgery, and soon. Ideally within the next few weeks." She gripped the side of the bed. "Surgery, how much will it cost?" He hesitated. "It will depend on the hospital and surgeon. But here, it will be around 12 million naira." The number made her stomach drop. 12 million, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. She thought of their bank account, the bills stacked at home, the rent due next month. It was an impossible mountain. But she looked at Ethan's small face, his eyes already drooping again, and she knew she had no choice. She would find the money somehow. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, smelling faintly of cologne and cigarettes. "What the hell happened?" he asked, his tone more annoyed than frightened. "He collapsed," Maya said tightly. "He needs heart surgery soon. 12 million. Daniel whistled low. "That's a lot." "A lot," she snapped. "It's his life, Daniel. I'm just saying, where are we supposed to get that kind of money?" She clenched her jaw. "We'll figure it out. I'll pick up extra shifts. We'll sell the car. You can ask Victor for a loan. We'll tell our families." "Victor's not exactly a charity," he muttered. But he didn't argue further. Over the next few days, Maya became a whirlwind of action. She spoke to her boss at the bookstore about extra hours, then went straight to her evening job cleaning offices and offered to work weekends. They posted a fundraiser on social media, explaining Ethan's condition, sharing photos of him smiling despite the hospital bed. Friends from church visited, leaving envelopes of cash on the bedside table. One neighbor brought a jar of coins she'd been saving for months. The donations trickled in, and for the first time, hope began to replace the icy fear in her chest. Daniel seemed cooperative at first. He told her he was meeting with Victor about a business deal that could bring in quick cash. He even posted the fundraiser link to his Facebook page. But something in his eyes, distant, distracted, kept her uneasy. One night, after a long shift, she found him on the balcony with his phone, speaking in low tones and smiling. When she stepped outside, he ended the call abruptly. "Who was that?" she asked. "Work stuff," he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. "Don't start." "I'm not starting," she said. This is about Ethan, Daniel. Everything else can wait." He nodded but didn't meet her eyes. At the hospital, Ethan grew weaker. He tired after a few sentences, his once bright voice barely above a whisper. Maya stayed by his side every night, holding his hand, telling him stories about rockets and faraway planets. She avoided thinking about what would happen if they didn't get the money in time. A week into his hospital stay, she sat with him while he slept, the monitor beeping softly. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The fundraiser had reached nearly half their goal. Relief flooded her. They were going to make it. She told herself that over and over. They were going to make it. She had no idea that in just days, that hope would shatter completely. The hum of the hospital machines had become part of Maya's daily soundtrack. Days blurred into nights as she sat at Ethan's bedside, holding his small, fragile hand, feeling the soft flutter of his pulse beneath her fingers. The nurses came and went in quiet efficiency, checking vitals, changing 4 fluids, offering sympathetic smiles. Every evening, she would update the whiteboard in the corner of the room with the total amount they had managed to raise for his surgery. By the end of that week, the figure read 7,800,000 Nigerian nairas. They were so close. It felt like a miracle, one built from the generosity of strangers, friends, church members, and the sheer force of her determination. "You're going to get better soon, baby," she whispered to Ethan one night, brushing a curl from his forehead. His eyes fluttered open, and he smiled faintly. "Will I be able to run again, Mama?" She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes, you'll run and play football and build rockets, just like you want." He nodded, drifting back to sleep. Daniel had been in and out of the hospital, but he was rarely there for long. When he came, it was usually with a box of takeout for Maya or a toy for Ethan, but he never stayed the night. He claimed he was working on something big to help cover the rest of the surgery costs. "Victor and I are handling it," he said one afternoon when Maya pressed him for details. "It's a quick deal. We close it, and we've got all the money we need, plus extra." "What kind of deal?" she asked. "You wouldn't understand, Maya. It's business," he replied, waving her off. She bristled. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child, Daniel. This is our son's life. I have the right to know exactly what you're doing." "I told you. I'm handling it," he said, his voice sharpening. "Just focus on Ethan and let me do my part." She stared at him for a moment, then turned away, unwilling to start a fight in the hospital room. But unease gnawed at her. Daniel had always been charming, persuasive, especially when he wanted to deflect, but he also had a history of making reckless decisions with money. She had learned that the hard way over the years, from failed investments to impulsive purchases they couldn't afford. Still, she told herself, maybe this time was different. Maybe he was telling the truth. 3 days later, the fundraiser total reached 11,500,000 Nigerian nairas. Maya could hardly contain her relief. "We're almost there, Daniel," she told him over the phone that evening. "I'll go to the bank tomorrow, transfer it into the hospital's account, and book the surgery date." "Actually, let me handle the bank transfer," he said quickly. "I'm already going there tomorrow for the deal with Victor. I can do both." "No, Daniel, I'll do it. I want to make sure everything is in place for the hospital." "Maya," he said, with that half-patient, half-condescending tone he used when he thought she was overstepping. "You have enough on your plate. Trust me with this." She hesitated, but finally agreed. "Fine, but make sure the hospital gets the payment receipt tomorrow. I'm not taking any chances." The next morning, she arrived at the hospital early. Ethan was in good spirits, drawing a lopsided rocket ship with the crayons one of the nurses had brought him. She kissed the top of his head and stepped into the hallway to call Daniel. No answer. She tried again at lunchtime. Still no answer. By late afternoon, her anxiety had grown into a knot in her chest. Finally, around 5 p.m., he called back. "Sorry, I was tied up," he said. "Everything's fine." "Did you make the payment to the hospital?" she asked. There was a pause. "Not yet. The deal with Victor took longer than expected. I'll handle it tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" she exclaimed. "Daniel, the surgery is scheduled for next week. We can't risk any delays." "Relax, Maya. It's under control." She wanted to argue, but Ethan was calling for her from inside the room, and she didn't want him to hear them fighting. That night, after putting Ethan to sleep, she logged into their bank account. Her stomach dropped. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Less than 2 million Nigerian nairas remained. Her hands shook as she refreshed the page, hoping it was some kind of error. But the numbers didn't change. "No, no, no," she whispered. There were multiple large withdrawals over the past 2 days, amounts she didn't recognize. One for 3,500,000 Nigerian nairas, another for 4 million Nigerian nairas, and one for 2 million Nigerian nairas just that morning. Her mind spun. She dialed Daniel's number. No answer. She called again and again. Finally, he picked up. "Why is the account almost empty, Daniel?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "It's fine," he said. "I told you I needed to move some money around for the deal. It's temporary." "Temporary?" That was Ethan's surgery money. "Calm down, Maya. The money will be back in the account in a few days, with extra. Just trust me." "Trust you?" she nearly shouted, keeping her voice low only because Ethan was sleeping. "You've emptied our account a week before our son's surgery, and you want me to just trust you?" "You're overreacting," he said, his tone dismissive. "I'm not," she said coldly. "If that money isn't back tomorrow, I'm going to the police." "Maya, don't be dramatic. I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up before she could respond. She stood in the dim hospital corridor, her phone clutched in her hand, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fury. Back in the room, she sat by Ethan's bed, watching his chest rise and fall, the steady beep of the monitor reminding her how little time they had. She barely slept that night, her mind replaying every red flag she had ignored over the past weeks. Daniel's vague answers, his absences, the hushed phone calls. By morning, she had resolved to go to the bank herself and demand answers. She called a nurse to stay with Ethan and took a taxi to the branch where their joint account was held. The teller printed the statement for her, and Maya scanned it, her eyes catching on something that made her blood run cold. The largest withdrawal, the 4 million Nigerian nairas, had been made at the airport foreign exchange counter. The 3,500,000 Nigerian nairas was a card payment to a luxury hotel booking site. Her breath caught. The airport. A hotel. Daniel wasn't investing or handling a deal. He was leaving. "Can you tell me if there are any pending transactions?" she asked the teller, her voice tight. The woman nodded, typing into her computer. "Yes, there's a recent authorization for an international hotel charge. Paris." Maya's hands clenched into fists. Paris. She didn't need anyone to tell her who he was with. She could already see Sofia Delgado's face in her mind, tall, slender, with a cascade of glossy hair and a laugh that had once made Maya's skin crawl when she heard it in the background of Daniel's late-night calls. Sofia had been just a client once, then just a friend. Maya had known better, but Daniel had a way of turning every suspicion into an accusation she ended up apologizing for. Not this time. Not when their son's life was at stake. She left the bank in a daze, her thoughts a storm of betrayal and disbelief. On the ride back to the hospital, she stared out at the city rushing past, her reflection in the window pale and drawn. How could he? How could he take the money meant to save their child and spend it on a trip with his mistress? When she returned to Ethan's room, he was awake, coloring quietly. "Where's Daddy?" he asked. She forced a smile. "Daddy's busy right now, sweetheart. But I'm here." She sat beside him, but her mind was elsewhere, already turning over what she would do next. Maya woke up in the stiff hospital chair to the faint sound of Ethan's cough. She had fallen asleep sometime after dawn, her head resting on her folded arms at his bedside. The nurse had already been in to check his vitals, adjusting the monitor and giving him medication. "Morning, Mama," Ethan said weakly. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, my astronaut. How's my brave boy feeling today?" "Tired," he admitted, his small hands fiddling with the blanket. "Did Daddy come?" She hesitated. "Not yet, but we'll see him soon." Her voice was steady, but inside, she was unraveling. She had spent the night replaying every moment of the past week, her mind circling back to the bank statement, the hotel booking in Paris, and the withdrawals. She had wanted to storm into Daniel's life and demand answers face to face, but Ethan's needs came first. She couldn't just leave him without knowing he'd be cared for. Around mid-morning, she called Daniel again. It rang and rang until it went to voicemail. She tried sending a text. "I know about the Paris trip. I know you took the money. We need to talk now." No reply. She tried Victor's number next. He picked up after a few rings, his voice cautious. "Maya, where is he?" she asked without preamble. Silence. "Victor, I'm not playing games. I know he took the money from Ethan's surgery fund. I know he's not here in the city. Where is he?" "Maya," Victor sighed. "It's complicated." "It's simple," she shot back. "You tell me where my husband is, or I will go to the police and drag both of you into this." "Look," Victor said, lowering his voice. "Daniel, he's in Paris. With Sophia." But nothing." Her voice cracked. "My son is lying in a hospital bed, and he took the money meant to save him to take his mistress on a vacation?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Victor said quickly. "He told me he needed a short-term loan, that he'd flip an investment and double it. I didn't know he was taking Sophia. I swear, Maya, I didn't." "Do you know how much time Ethan has?" "Weeks. Maybe days if his condition worsens. And you just watched him drain our account." "I thought he'd pay it back before you noticed," Victor said lamely. "You thought? You're as bad as he is." She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking with rage. She sat there for a long moment, staring at the floor, before Ethan's small voice pulled her back. "Mama, are you okay?" She forced a smile again. "I'm okay, baby. Just thinking." But she wasn't okay. Her mind was already shifting into action mode. She needed proof, something solid to hold Daniel accountable, not just for her own sake, but in case she had to take legal action to recover the money. She left Ethan with a trusted nurse and took a taxi home. The apartment felt colder than usual, shadows pooling in the corners. She went straight to Daniel's desk in the small home office. He had never been particularly careful about hiding things from her, always relying on charm and deflection. In the top drawer, she found receipts, restaurant bills, clothing store invoices, and then, tucked in an envelope, a printed itinerary. Her stomach turned as she read the words, Paris, France. Check-in, Hotel du Louvre. Guests, Daniel Alvarez, Sofia Delgado. There it was in black and white. She stared at the dates. It had started 2 days ago. He was still there. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through social media. Sophia's accounts were public. Maya had never blocked her, preferring to keep an eye on her subtle taunts and glamorous posts. Sure enough, Sophia's Instagram was a parade of Paris snapshots, the Eiffel Tower at night, wine glasses clinking in a candlelit restaurant, a hotel balcony with a view of the Seine. In one photo, taken by someone else, Sophia leaned back in a chair, laughing, Daniel's hand visible on her shoulder. Maya's stomach knotted. She zoomed in on the watch on his wrist. Ethan had picked it out for him last Christmas. It felt like a slap. She didn't cry. The tears had dried up sometime between the bank statement and Victor's confession. What she felt now was cold, purposeful anger. She opened her laptop and began drafting an email to Daniel. It wasn't a plea or an outburst. It was a clear, concise message. You have 24 hours to return every naira you took from Ethan's surgery fund. If you don't, I will contact the police, the hospital administration, and the media. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. She hit send, then returned to the hospital. Ethan was napping when she arrived, his small body curled on its side. She sat by his bed and held his hand, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest. By evening, Daniel still hadn't replied. She wasn't surprised. The next morning, she decided to dig deeper. She reached out to an old friend, Anita, who worked as a journalist for a local news station. "Maya, what happened? You sound furious," Anita said when she answered. "It's about Daniel," Maya said flatly. "He stole our son's surgery money and took his mistress to Paris." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I have the bank statements, the itinerary, and proof from her social media." "Maya, this is big. But if we run this story, it's going to blow up." "I want it to blow up," Maya said. "He's left me no choice." Anita promised to look into it, but Maya knew it would take time to gather the full story. Meanwhile, she still needed the money. That afternoon, while picking up Ethan's prescription at the pharmacy, she overheard two women chatting near the counter. "I saw Daniel Alvarez at the airport," one of them said, "with that Sophia girl. They were holding hands, all dressed up like they were in some movie." Maya froze, her hands tightening on her purse. She didn't turn around, just listened as they laughed about how good Sophia looked and how Daniel seemed like a man who didn't have a care in the world. A man who didn't have a care in the world, while his son was fighting for his life. When she got back to the hospital, she found Ethan awake, coloring again. "Mama," he said, "can we go to the park when I get better?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, baby. We'll go to the park. As soon as you're strong enough." Later that night, alone in the quiet of the hospital room, she checked her phone. No reply from Daniel. No returned funds. Just more Instagram posts from Sophia. Now a photo of her in a silk dress, Daniel's reflection visible in the mirror behind her as he took the picture. Maya stared at it for a long moment, then made a decision. If Daniel thought he could run away and enjoy his trip while she stayed silent, he was wrong. She would confront him, not over the phone, not through texts, but in person. She opened her laptop again and began looking at flights to Paris. Maya had never been on an international flight before, but booking one to Paris felt less like a dream and more like preparing for battle. She spent the night in the hospital with Ethan, quietly arranging everything. She spoke to the head nurse and explained that she had an urgent matter to handle, but would only be gone for 2 days. Her neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, agreed to stay at the hospital when Maya wasn't there so Ethan would always have a familiar face by his side. By dawn, she had her plan. She booked the earliest flight to Paris using the emergency savings she'd been keeping hidden from Daniel, a small stash meant for unexpected bills, now becoming the weapon she'd use to face him. Before leaving, she sat by Ethan's bed, his small hand curled in hers even in sleep. She kissed his forehead gently. "Mama will be back soon, my astronaut," she whispered. "I just have to fix something." She took one last look at him before slipping out. The airport was a blur of announcements, rolling suitcases, and tired faces. Maya's heart pounded as she went through security, clutching her passport. The flight was long, but she barely noticed the hours passing. Her mind was a loop of questions. Would he deny it? Would he lie straight to her face? Would Sophia try to humiliate her? She replayed the image of Ethan lying weak in his hospital bed, and it fueled the fire in her chest. When the plane landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, Maya felt the weight of the moment settle on her. Paris was cold and draped in a gray winter sky, but the city still shimmered with its quiet charm. She didn't care about charm. She cared about finding Daniel. From the itinerary she'd found, she knew they were staying at the Hotel du Louvre. She took a taxi straight there, her eyes scanning the Paris streets without really seeing them. The hotel was grand, its gold-lettered sign gleaming against the stone facade. She walked into the lobby, her coat clutched tight, and approached the front desk. "I'm here to see Daniel Alvarez," she said firmly. The receptionist's polite smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, madam. I cannot give out guest information. Tell him his wife is here," Maya said, her voice slicing through the air. That word, wife, made the receptionist hesitate before picking up the phone. Minutes later, Daniel emerged from the elevator, looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tailored coat, designer scarf, freshly shined shoes. But when his eyes met hers, The color drained from his face. "Maya," he said, his voice low, cautious. "What are you?" "Where's the money, Daniel?" She cut in. "Don't play dumb. Where's Ethan's surgery money?" Other guests in the lobby began to turn their heads. "Maya, let's talk about this upstairs," he said, glancing around nervously. "Oh, you don't want to talk about it here? Why not? Is it because you're afraid people will hear how you took the money meant to save your son's life and brought your mistress to Paris?" A murmur spread through the crowd. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Keep your voice down." "No," she said, her voice rising. "I want everyone to hear. I want them to know exactly what kind of man you are." Just then, Sophia stepped out of the elevator, wearing a cream-colored coat over a silk dress, her makeup perfect. She froze when she saw Maya, then smiled faintly. "Maya," she said smoothly, as if they were old friends running into each other. "What a surprise." "Oh, don't act surprised," Maya said. "You knew exactly where this money came from. You knew it was for a little boy's surgery, and you still boarded that plane." Sophia's smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it," Maya snapped. "I have the bank statements, the itinerary, the receipts. You both are parasites." Daniel stepped forward. "That's enough." Maya turned on him. "Enough? You left your child in a hospital bed to sip champagne in Paris. You are a disgrace as a father and as a man." Her voice shook, not from fear, but from the sheer force of her anger. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch him struggle to breathe while you're here playing the rich man?" By now, phones were out. Guests were filming. The receptionist had stopped pretending not to listen. A couple whispered in French, their eyes darting between Maya and Daniel. Sophia tugged at Daniel's arm. "Let's go upstairs," she muttered. "No," Maya said again. "You're going to tell me, here and now, when the money will be back in that account. You have 24 hours. Daniel tried to lower his voice. "Maya, I'll fix this. You'll fix this by wiring the money before I get back to Lagos. Because if you don't, I will make sure every news outlet knows your name. And I have a friend at the station who will run it with all the proof I have. This," she gestured at the people filming, "is just the start." Sophia shifted uncomfortably under the growing stares. "Daniel, let's just give her the money, so she leaves." He shot her an annoyed look, but Maya caught the flicker of panic in his eyes. "You think I won't do it?" Maya continued. "Try me. This will be on every social media platform before you even check out of this hotel." Daniel exhaled, the fight draining out of him. "Fine. You'll have it by tomorrow." "No," Maya said sharply. "Today." She turned and walked out, leaving them standing there. Her hands were trembling as she stepped into the crisp Paris air, but she didn't care. She had faced him. She had humiliated him in the same way he had tried to humiliate her. Only hers had the truth on its side. Back at her small-budget hotel across the city, she kept her phone in her hand, waiting. Hours passed. Then, finally, a message came from the bank. 9,500,000 Nigerian nairas deposit from Daniel Alvarez. It wasn't a full amount, but it was enough to book the surgery date. Relief flooded her, so hard, she sat down on the edge of the bed, her eyes closing. She messaged Anita, "Get ready. I have the rest of the story for you when I'm back." The next morning, she flew home, exhausted but steady. At the hospital, Ethan's face lit up when she walked in. "Mama," he said, his voice weak but happy. She hugged him gently, careful not to disturb his foreline. "I told you I'd fix it," she murmured. "We're going to get you better, my astronaut." She didn't tell him about Paris, or the confrontation, or the way Daniel had looked when the truth hit him in public. Those were details for another time, if ever. Right now, all that mattered was that they had enough to move forward, and nothing, not even Daniel, was going to stop her from making sure Ethan got that surgery. The sun over Lagos was blindingly bright the morning Maya stepped out of the taxi and back into St. Catherine's Hospital. Her body was heavy with exhaustion from the long flight, but her heart carried a strange blend of relief and grim resolve. She had the money, most of it at least, and she was going to make sure it went directly where it belonged this time. She didn't trust Daniel with so much as a naira after what she had seen. Ethan was awake when she walked in, his face lighting up instantly. "Mama, you came back." His voice was still soft, but it held more energy than it had in days. Maya bent over and kissed his forehead. "Of course I came back, baby. And guess what? We're booking your surgery today." His eyes widened. "Really?" She nodded. "Really? We're not waiting anymore." She called the hospital's finance office immediately, arranging to transfer the 9.5 million Nigerian nairas directly into their account. Within the hour, she had a confirmed surgery date, 3 days away. A nurse came in to check Ethan's vitals, and Maya could see the subtle relief in her eyes when she learned the payment had been made. "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Alvarez," the nurse said softly. "We'll take good care of him." As she signed the final consent forms, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Anita. "The video is everywhere." Maya frowned, opening the link Anita had sent. It was the Paris hotel confrontation. Someone had posted it on TikTok, and it had already been shared thousands of times. The caption read, "Wife confronts husband who spent their sick child's surgery money on a trip with his mistress." The comments were a mix of outrage and disbelief. Some users tagged Daniel's company page, others Sophia's social media accounts. Anita followed up with another message. "I told you it would blow up. The station wants an interview. Do you want to talk on record?" Maya stared at the screen. She hadn't planned for this to become public on such a scale, but part of her knew it could be the only way to keep Daniel from doing something reckless again. She typed back, "Not now." After the surgery, by the end of that day, the fallout for Daniel had already begun. The company he co-owned with Victor released a statement saying they were suspending him pending an internal review. Sophia posted a story on Instagram claiming she had no idea where the money came from, but the damage was done. Brands were quietly removing her from campaigns, and gossip blogs were tearing into her lavish Paris posts. Late that evening, Daniel finally called. Maya almost didn't pick up, but she wanted to hear what he had to say. "Maya," he began, his voice low and hoarse, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she replied coldly. "Ethan's surgery is booked. That's all that matters." I made a mistake," he said. "A mistake," she snapped. "You call stealing from your son's surgery fun to take your mistress abroad a mistake? Daniel, that's not a mistake. That's who you are." He was silent for a long moment. "You've destroyed me," he finally said. "You destroyed yourself," she answered. "And if you think I'll shield you from the consequences, think again." She ended the call without another word. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. The doctors explained the procedure in detail, warning her about the risks, but reassuring her that Ethan's chances were good. Maya stayed at his bedside almost constantly, reading him his favorite space books, letting him tell her about the rocket ship he wanted to build one day. Every now and then, she caught him looking at her with that open, trusting gaze that made her throat tighten. He had no idea how close they had come to losing this chance. On the morning of the surgery, Maya woke before dawn. She washed her face, braided her hair back neatly, and put on the same navy sweater she had worn the day he was diagnosed. It felt like a small talisman now. The nurses came to wheel Ethan into pre-op, and Maya walked beside the gurney, holding his hand. "Mama," he whispered, "don't go far." "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. The surgery lasted hours that felt like entire lifetimes. Maya sat in the waiting area, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. Anita stopped by briefly with a cup of tea and a reassuring squeeze of her shoulder. "You're stronger than you know," she said quietly. Maya only nodded, her eyes fixed on the clock. Finally, the surgeon emerged, his face calm. "The procedure went well," he said. "He's stable. We'll monitor him closely for the next 48 hours, but so far, everything looks good." Maya felt her knees go weak. She thanked him over and over before following the nurse into recovery. Ethan was pale and groggy, but when his eyes fluttered open and found her, he managed a small smile. "Told you I'd be okay," he murmured. She laughed through tears. "Yes, you did." The next days were filled with cautious optimism. Ethan's color returned little by little, and he was able to sit up, then walk a few steps with help. Visitors from church brought food and small toys. Donations continued to trickle into the fundraiser. Even though the surgery had been paid for, people were moved by the story, and many left notes saying they wanted to help Maya with recovery costs. Meanwhile, Daniel's world continued to crumble. Anita kept her updated without Maya even asking. "Victor's trying to distance himself from Daniel completely," she reported one afternoon. "Clients are pulling out of deals. And Sophia? She's been dropped by 3 brands this week." Maya listened without comment. She didn't rejoice in his downfall. It wasn't who she was, but she also didn't pity him. Actions had consequences. 2 weeks after the surgery, Ethan was discharged. Maya carried him to the taxi herself, even though the driver offered to help. At home, she set him up in the living room with pillows and his favorite blanket. The apartment felt different now, lighter, somehow, without Daniel's presence. He hadn't tried to come by, and she hadn't invited him. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, looking thinner, his eyes shadowed. "I just wanted to see him," he said quietly. "You can see him," she replied, stepping aside. "But you don't get to pretend everything's fine." He nodded, walking in. Ethan's face lit up when he saw his father, and Maya's heart twisted at the sight. She let them talk for a while, then gently told Daniel it was time to go. He didn't argue. After he left, Ethan looked at her curiously. "Mama, is Daddy in trouble?" She hesitated, then said, "Daddy made some bad choices, and now he has to fix them." Ethan thought about this for a moment, then nodded. "I hope he does. I don't want him to be sad." Maya kissed his forehead. "You have a good heart, my astronaut. Never lose that." In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Ethan grew stronger, going from short walks to playing in the courtyard again. The foundation idea that had been a passing thought before now became something real. Maya began the paperwork to start a nonprofit for families facing urgent medical bills. The support from the community was overwhelming, and Anita promised to cover the launch on her show. One afternoon, Maya sat on the balcony, watching Ethan draw with chalk on the pavement below. She thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the betrayal, the fight in Paris, the surgery. She had been pushed to the edge and had come back stronger. Daniel's betrayal had nearly broken her, but in the end, it had sharpened her resolve to never again let someone else hold her life, or her son's, at ransom. Her phone buzzed with a message from Anita. "When you're ready to tell your full story on air, the world will listen." Maya smiled faintly. Maybe one day she would. But for now, her focus was on Ethan, on building something lasting, and on living free from the shadow of someone else's choices. 3 months had passed since Ethan's surgery, and the apartment felt alive again. The beeping of hospital monitors was replaced with the sound of cartoons, the scraping of crayons on paper, and Ethan's laughter drifting from the living room. He was a different child now, still small and recovering, but with color in his cheeks and the boundless curiosity that had once been dimmed by illness. Every time Maya saw him run a few steps without losing his breath, her heart swelled. Maya herself had changed. She still worked her 2 jobs, but she carried herself differently. The fear that had once hung over her like a cloud had been replaced by something steadier, confidence, determination. The day the hospital had discharged Ethan, she promised herself she would never again let her son's well-being depend on someone else's morality. That promise was the seed that grew into her new project, the Ethan Foundation. It started small. Anita aired a segment about Ethan's recovery and Maya's idea to help other families facing urgent medical bills. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people wanting to donate, volunteer, or share their own stories. Maya spent evenings at the dining table drafting plans, filling out registration forms, and meeting with volunteers. Her phone became a constant buzz of calls and messages, but she didn't mind. This time, the chaos was for something good. Ethan would sometimes sit beside her, sketching in his notebook while she worked. "Mama, will the Ethan Foundation build rockets too?" he asked once. She smiled. "Not rockets, my astronaut, but we'll help other children get better, so they can grow up to build their own." While Maya's world was rebuilding, Daniel's was crumbling faster than she could have imagined. His company, once his pride, had voted him out completely. Victor had given an interview to a business magazine, painting Daniel as reckless and untrustworthy, clearly trying to salvage his own reputation. Sophia's fall had been just as swift. Once the darling of brand campaigns, she now found herself ignored by sponsors and flooded with angry comments on every post. She and Daniel were spotted arguing outside a restaurant one evening, the video spreading online with captions like "Karma at work." Daniel called Maya twice in those months, his tone subdued. The first time, he asked if she could help smooth things over with the media by making a statement that he had returned the money. She refused without hesitation. "Daniel, I'm not your PR manager," she said sharply. "You made your bed." The second call was more personal. He said he missed Ethan, wanted to see him more often. Maya didn't block him, but she set boundaries. "You can visit, but only if you respect our rules. No lies. No empty promises." When he finally came by one Saturday afternoon, Ethan ran to greet him. "Daddy, look, I can run now." Daniel knelt to hug him, and for a moment, Maya saw something genuine in his face. But she didn't mistake emotion for change. Trust wasn't something she could give him back easily. She let him stay for an hour, watching his father and son build a Lego tower together, before quietly ushering him to the door. Meanwhile, the Ethan Foundation's launch event approached. It would be held at the community hall, with a modest stage, banners printed by a local shop, and rows of plastic chairs. Anita had promised media coverage, and several doctors from St. Catherine's had agreed to attend. The night before, Maya stayed up late, going over her speech. She wanted it to be honest, not just about what happened to her, but about the resilience that could grow from betrayal. The morning of the event, the hall buzzed with activity. Volunteers arranged tables of food and drinks. Children darted between chairs, and a local band tuned their instruments. Maya arrived with Ethan, who wore a small suit and beamed at everyone who greeted him. When Anita spotted them, she hurried over. "You look amazing," she said, hugging Maya. "Are you ready for this?" Maya smiled. "I've been ready for a long time." When it was time, Anita took the stage first, introducing Maya to the crowd. "This is a story of a mother who refused to give up," she said. "A story about turning pain into power and betrayal into something that saves lives." Maya walked up to the microphone, her palms only slightly damp. She looked out at the faces, neighbors, friends, donors, reporters. "3 months ago," she began, "I was sitting in a hospital room, watching my son fight for his life. We had almost raised enough money for his surgery when it was stolen by the person I trusted most. That day, I thought I had lost everything. But what I didn't know was that I was about to find a strength I never realized I had." She told them about Paris, not in detail to humiliate, but enough to show the contrast between selfishness and sacrifice. She spoke about the generosity of strangers, the long nights in the hospital, and the moment Ethan opened his eyes after surgery. "This foundation is named after my son because he's the reason I'm standing here. And it's for every parent who lies awake wondering how they'll save their child." The applause was warm and long. Several people stood, clapping until Maya stepped back from the microphone. She glanced down at Ethan, who was clapping too, his smile wide enough to light the whole hall. After the speeches, people mingled, sharing stories and pledging donations. Doctors offered to volunteer their time. Local businesses promised sponsorships, and Anita pulled Maya aside. "You've started something big," she said. "Bigger than you think." Later, as the sun set and the event wound down, Maya sat on the stage steps watching Ethan chase a balloon with other children. She thought of the night in the hospital when she'd checked the bank account and seen it nearly empty. The panic that had set in, the fury that had carried her to Paris. She thought of standing in that hotel lobby, telling Daniel the truth in front of strangers. And now here she was, surrounded by people who believed in what she was building. When the hall finally emptied and they packed up the last of the chairs, Maya took Ethan's hand. "Ready to go home, astronaut?" "Ready," he said, yawning. That night, as she tucked him into bed, he asked, "Mama, is Daddy still in trouble?" She paused, smoothing his blanket. "He's figuring things out," she said carefully. Sometimes people have to face the consequences of their choices before they can change. Ethan nodded sleepily. I hope he changes. Maya watched him drift off, the room quiet except for his steady breathing. She knew life wouldn't always be easy. There would be more challenges, more tests of her strength. But she also knew that she had faced the worst moment of her life and turned it into something that could help others. She had reclaimed her power, and no one could take it from her again. In the weeks that followed, the Ethan Foundation began its first project, covering the medical costs for a 5-year-old girl in another part of Lagos who needed kidney surgery. Maya visited her in the hospital, sitting with her mother and offering the same words she had once clung to. You're not alone. We'll get through this. By then, Daniel had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals. Maya didn't follow his life closely, but she heard through mutual friends that he had moved into a smaller apartment and was taking whatever work he could find. She didn't feel triumphant, only resolute. She hoped he would one day be a better man, for Ethan's sake, but her life no longer revolved around whether he did. One Saturday afternoon, Maya and Ethan visited the park. He ran across the grass, chasing a kite held by another child, his laughter ringing through the air. Maya sat on a bench, the late afternoon sun warm on her face. She thought about the arc of their journey, from the fear of losing him to the fight to save him, from betrayal to building something new. It hadn't been the life she imagined, but it was theirs, and it was stronger now than it had ever been. When Ethan finally ran back to her, breathless and grinning, she scooped him into her arms. Mama, he said between giggles, when I grow up, I want to help people too. She hugged him tighter. You already are my astronaut. You already are. And as they walked home together, hand in hand, the city alive around them, Maya knew that their story, the real story, wasn't about what Daniel had done. It was about what she and Ethan had survived, and the future they were building together, one step at a time. The rainy season had rolled into Lagos with heavy clouds and the kind of showers that turned narrow streets into shallow rivers. Maya stood by the window of her apartment, watching droplets streak down the glass, a mug of tea warming her hands. Ethan sat on the floor nearby, building a miniature city out of blocks, complete with a crooked tower that leaned dangerously to one side. He was stronger now, the pallor gone from his cheeks, though she still insisted on regular checkups and a careful diet. His energy was returning, and with it, the mischief she'd missed so much. The Ethan Foundation was gaining momentum. Since helping the little girl with kidney surgery, they had taken on 2 more cases, a boy needing chemotherapy and a newborn requiring surgery for a cleft lip. The work kept Maya busy, but it was the kind of busy that left her fulfilled rather than drained. She had volunteers who believed in the mission, and Anita had been instrumental in keeping media attention on their progress. That morning, Maya was sorting through donation receipts when her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. Hello. A deep, weary voice came through the line. Maya, it's Daniel. Her shoulders stiffened. What do you want? There was a pause. Can we meet? Just for a few minutes. I need to talk to you. It's important. She glanced at Ethan, who was now making airplane noises with one of his blocks. If this is about you trying to get me to speak to the media to clear your name, forget it. It's not that, he said quickly. I promise. Just please. Something in his tone, quieter, stripped of the usual arrogance, made her pause. Fine. 1 hour. At the cafe near the hospital. When she arrived, the cafe was half empty, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Daniel was already there, seated in a corner, wearing a worn leather jacket and looking noticeably older. The sharpness she remembered in his posture was gone, replaced by a slump that spoke of fatigue. She sat down across from him. Talk. He studied her for a moment before speaking. I've lost almost everything, Maya. The company's gone. Most of my friends disappeared when the money did. Sophia left. That's not surprising, she said, her tone cool. You built your life on the wrong things, Daniel. Eventually it collapses. He winced but didn't argue. I know I can't undo what I did to you, or to Ethan, but I want to. I don't know, make amends somehow. She folded her arms. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I've been working with a small construction outfit. It's nothing like before, but it's honest work. I thought maybe I could start making contributions to the Ethan Foundation. Quietly. No one needs to know they're from me. Maya studied him, trying to detect any manipulation. Why? Because I need to do something good for once, he said simply. I see your updates online. You're helping people. I should have been part of that, but I chose the wrong path. Let me at least give something back. She sipped her tea slowly, weighing his words. I'll think about it, she said finally. But understand this. Any involvement from you is about the foundation, not about us. I'm not letting you back into my life the way things were. He nodded. I know. After their meeting, she walked away with mixed feelings. Part of her doubted his sincerity, but another part hoped he truly meant it. She wasn't naive enough to believe people changed overnight, but she also believed in accountability, and maybe, just maybe, in redemption. 2 weeks later, the foundation received an anonymous donation of 500,000 Nigerian nairas. She suspected it was from Daniel, though she didn't ask. If he wanted to contribute quietly, she would let him. What mattered was the work being done. Life settled into a steady rhythm again. Ethan started attending school part-time, his classmates welcoming him back with homemade cards. Maya loved seeing him run across the courtyard without gasping for air. In the evenings, they'd sit together and watch documentaries about space, his fascination with rockets undimmed. One Friday afternoon, Anita called. You're going to want to sit down for this, she said. Why? Because a major hospital in Abuja just reached out. They've seen the work you're doing and want to partner with the Ethan Foundation for a nationwide fundraising campaign. Maya's heart skipped. Are you serious? Dead serious. They want to meet next week. That meeting would prove to be a turning point. The Abuja hospital's director was a tall, dignified woman named Dr. Bello, who spoke with both authority and warmth. We have the facilities, but not always the funds, Dr. Bello explained. With your foundation's transparency and track record, we believe we can save many more lives together. By the end of the meeting, they had agreed to pilot a program that would cover critical surgeries for 10 children in the first phase. Maya left feeling both exhilarated and humbled. This was bigger than anything she'd imagined when she first scribbled the idea for the foundation at her dining table. Back in Lagos, preparations for the campaign began immediately. Volunteers worked late into the night designing flyers, organizing charity events, and setting up an online platform for donations. Anita's media team produced a short documentary on Ethan's journey, blending hospital footage with scenes of him playing in the park. When it aired, it sparked another wave of support. Through all of this, Daniel kept his distance, sending occasional text messages asking about Ethan's health and, once in a while, slipping in another anonymous donation. Maya kept her responses brief, but polite. She could appreciate the gesture without forgetting the past. The first major fundraising gala was held in a spacious hall decorated with strings of lights and photographs of the children they aimed to help. Guests arrived in suits and evening gowns, mingling as a small jazz band played. Maya wore a simple but elegant dress in deep blue, her hair swept back, a quiet confidence in her posture. She gave a short speech about the foundation's mission, careful to keep the focus on the children rather than herself. The night was a success, raising enough to fully fund the first batch of surgeries. As the event wound down, Maya stepped outside for some fresh air. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and clean. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Daniel standing there, hands in his pockets. I came to see it for myself, he said. You've built something incredible. She met his gaze evenly. I built it because I had to, because you left me no choice. He nodded, a shadow of regret in his eyes. I know, and I'm sorry, Maya. More than I can say. She didn't reply, just turned back toward the hall where laughter and music floated out into the night. Back inside, Ethan was dancing awkwardly with a group of other children, his face alight with joy. Maya watched him for a long moment, the noise of the room fading in her ears. This, his laughter, his health, the ripple effect their story had created, was the real victory. Daniel's presence didn't change that, nor could it take it away. By the time the gala ended, pledges had exceeded their target. The Ethan Foundation was no longer just a small community initiative. It was becoming a national movement. As Maya and Ethan walked to their taxi, she felt the weight of the past lift a little more. The road ahead would still have challenges, but they were moving forward, step by step, and that was enough. The city was alive with the hum of evening traffic, but inside Maya's apartment, the air was warm, quiet, and scented with the jollof rice simmering on the stove. Ethan sat at the table, scribbling in a sketchbook, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. He was drawing another rocket, this one bigger than any he'd imagined before, with bold lines and a flag fluttering on its side. Every now and then, he'd glance up to ask, "Mama, how many people can fit in a spaceship? Or do astronauts get scared?" She answered patiently, grateful for every question, because there had been a time she feared she'd never hear his curious voice again. Life had found its rhythm again, but it was not the same as before. Maya was different, more deliberate with her choices, protective not just of Ethan but of her own peace. The Ethan Foundation had grown beyond anything she could have imagined in those desperate hospital nights. The partnership with the Abuja hospital had taken off, surgeries were being funded and completed, and stories of survival were coming in from across the country. Maya made it a point to meet as many families as she could. She wanted them to see that she wasn't just a name on a donation letter. She was someone who understood their fear and their fight. One Saturday morning, she attended the discharge of a 5-year-old boy named Ibrahim, who had just undergone heart surgery. His mother, Aisha, clung to Maya's hands with tears in her eyes. "If not for you, my son," she began, her voice breaking. Maya squeezed her hands. "No, if not for the people who believed and gave. I'm just a bridge." But as she walked back to her car, she felt the weight of those words. She was the bridge between loss and hope, between despair and survival. Daniel remained on the outskirts of her life, contacting her only to check on Ethan or quietly send contributions. He never made them in his name, but she always knew when they were from him. There was a pattern in the way the amounts were rounded, and the transfers came a few days after his calls. She let it be. She had no interest in repairing what had been shattered between them, but if his guilt could help other children, she would take it. One rainy afternoon, Anita called. "Maya, I think it's time we told the whole story, your version, from the beginning." Maya hesitated. "I'm not sure, Anita. It's not just my story, it's Ethan's. I don't want him to grow up with this being his only narrative." "I get that," Anita said. "But think about the families we could reach. Think about how many people might donate if they understood what you came through to build this foundation." Maya promised to think about it, and for days, she turned the idea over in her mind. She remembered how humiliated she'd felt in that Paris hotel lobby, the sting of betrayal, the weight of knowing her child's life was hanging in the balance. She remembered, too, the surge of strength that had carried her through those moments. If telling the story could give someone else that strength, maybe it was worth it. 2 weeks later, she sat in a small studio, lights glaring softly, microphone clipped to her dress. The interviewer, a calm-voiced woman named Kemi, began gently. "Maya, tell us about Ethan." From there, the conversation wove through their journey. The diagnosis, the fundraising, the shock of discovering the money was gone, the confrontation, the surgery, and the birth of the Ethan Foundation. Maya didn't name Daniel directly, but she didn't sugarcoat the betrayal either. She spoke with clarity, not vengeance. By the time the interview aired, messages were pouring in from people across Nigeria and beyond. Some were survivors of similar betrayals. Others were simply moved to help. The foundation's donation page nearly crashed from the influx. Within a week, they had raised enough to fund 20 more surgeries. Maya stood in the small office they had rented, barely more than 2 desks and a whiteboard, and felt a quiet sense of awe. This, she thought, was what came from refusing to be broken. One evening, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there in the rain, an envelope in his hand. He looked thinner than before, the lines around his eyes deeper. "It's for Ethan," he said, holding out the envelope. "For his education." She took it without opening it. "Thank you." He didn't try to come in. I'm glad he's doing well, he said. She nodded. He is. And he'll keep doing well. He hesitated, then asked, Do you think one day he'll forgive me? She met his gaze steadily. I don't know. That's between you and him. But if you want that day to come, you'll need to keep showing up for the right reasons. He nodded once, then turned and walked back into the rain. She closed the door quietly, her grip on the envelope tightening just slightly before setting it on the counter. Months later, the foundation hosted its largest event yet, a children's health fair with free screenings, games, and educational workshops. Families came from miles away, filling the park with laughter and color. Ethan, now able to run freely, darted between booths with his friends. Maya watched him, her heart swelling. She thought back to the hospital bed, to the moment she feared she might lose him, and felt an almost dizzying gratitude. That afternoon, as she stood on the small stage to thank everyone for coming, she caught sight of Daniel at the edge of the crowd. He wasn't dressed to stand out, and he didn't come forward. But he watched, his eyes fixed on Ethan. She didn't wave, didn't call attention to him, but she saw the small nod he gave before turning to leave. The day wound down with music, dancing, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had signed up hundreds of children for checkups and vaccinations. As Maya and the volunteers packed up, Anita came over, her smile wide. You realize you've built something that's going to outlive all of us, right? Maya laughed. Let's just get through this year first. But she knew Anita was right. The Ethan Foundation was no longer just about saving her son. It was about giving countless children the chance to dream beyond hospital walls. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Maya sat at her desk, looking over the list of surgeries scheduled for the next quarter. Names, ages, diagnoses, all representing little lives about to be given another chance. She thought about how far they had come, how close they had been to a very different ending, and felt a deep, unshakable peace. She didn't need Daniel's validation. She didn't need the world's applause. She had her son, her purpose, and the knowledge that she had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and turned it into something that would ripple outward for years to come. Before going to bed, she checked on Ethan one last time. He was curled under his blanket, breathing evenly, a small model rocket clutched in his hand. She brushed a kiss across his forehead and whispered, Sleep well, my astronaut. The sky's not the limit for you, it's just the beginning. And as the rain tapped softly against the windows, Maya felt certain of one thing. No matter what storms might come, they had already proven they could weather them. Together. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.